So, no, let's move a little bit further on. Oh, it started. Okay. Hello. So over to you.
Okay.
Presentation. Did it on its own.
So where did you say that? Sorry, the desktop?
On the desktop, apparently. I hope. No. Well, it said it was on the desktop. Oh, bloody hell. Okay. So is it in downloads? No, nothing here.
I think it's on OneDrive.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. All right. Okay. I try to avoid the OneDrive, but okay. Very good. Fantastic. Oh.
Okay, so I'm doing my presentation on the adventurer's life is hard, specifically to do with what it tells us about Nazi occupation, what it doesn't tell us, and like how it tells us in the film. So to give some historical context, on the 30th of September 1938, Britain, France, Italy, and Germany all came together to sign the Munich Agreement. That was essentially an agreement that this region in Czechoslovakia, is it Sudetenland?
Sudetenland. Okay, yes, okay.
Essentially, this region of Czechoslovakia that is largely populated by ethnic Germans could be taken over by Germany. But this was without any participation from Czechoslovakia. So this was not just a geopolitical loss, it was also a psychological one. As one historian's notes, it really deepens this national sense of victimhood within Czechoslovakia. And then just 6 months later, in March 1939, Nazi Germany had completely taken over all of Czech lands and turned it into the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia.
Yes. Can I say something? I repeat myself what I was saying here at 1 o'clock. One interesting thing, the presenter at 1 o'clock had a map there, and you could see that it was absolutely brutal. They basically destroyed the country. They just basically took the edges off, especially in northern Moravia. And I just wanted to add that, of course, these were these 3 million Germans, basically, that were incorporated into Nazi Germany. Now, in 1945, as I keep saying, with agreement of the Western Allies, including Churchill, all these Germans were deported to Germany, right? And this area became kind of empty. And they tried to the government tried to sort of give incentives to people to move there. And in fact, I have a friend in the Czech Republic whose grandmother used to live in some kind of a Czech colony in Romania, and they all packed up and went and sort of inhabited one of these deserted villages in southwestern Bohemia. And I want to say that, interestingly, this removal of the original German population has created a real problem, because the new Czech population is never properly kind of integrated or settled there. And these areas, to this very day, and it's almost 100 years later, are still economically weak. And in fact, there is a continuing sort of problem. 2 weeks ago, there was a general election in the Czech Republic, and the sort of existing, allegedly fairly normal right-of-center government, pro-Western, fell, and an oligarch government was elected. Babiš is the oligarch's name, because there are quite a lot of people, maybe about 30% of the population, who are really quite poor, and they mostly live in this Sudetenland. So it is really quite interesting for you historians, how stuff from the past has impact to this very day, right? So anyway, I just wanted to intercede here. Sorry, I'm repeating myself for whoever watches this video. Okay.
And then Slovakia was by name only kind of became this independent state, but quite a lot of historians call it this puppet state. So it's still under this Nazi regime, it's still like controlled by this Nazi regime. And this quote from Mary Hyman, is it? The opening line, she says, is Czechoslovakia disappeared from the map just 20 years after it was first there. So I thought that was really interesting, that you can see straight away that how they've been silenced and how they've been stripped away. So then, just 2 years later, in 1941, that is when the film The Adventurer's Life is Hard came out. So it's like born into this political vacuum as it is already. And it was the Barrandov Studios, but when I was reading it online, during that time it had been like absorbed by the Prague Film AG. I think studios, so essentially it's now this part of this Nazi propaganda infrastructure, like it had to be censored, and the scripts had to be censored and stuff, and it meant like the director, like, is it Martin Frick?
Yes, it is. It is
Martin
still him.
Frick.
Yes, like the one who did that first film from 1933.
So the director
indeed,
Martin Frick had to come up with creative ways to get around this censorship, and that brings us on to the quote that kind of got given as help to create this presentation. That's it in Latin, but in English it says, "When they are silent, they cry out." So this kind of conceptualizes that idea of like the theorist Michael Foucault. So I did a bit about that in English and stuff, about how silence is not just the absence of speech, that it can create power itself. There's two different kind of things about how power is this form of control and how it can create discourse, as well as how it's this form of constraint. And then when I was reading a bit more about that, I came across Václav Havel. So he was a Czech dissident later on, and then a president, and he wrote about in his essays, Power of the Powerless, he wrote about this story about a greengrocer who could put this sign, this communist sign, on his shop window. And essentially his argument was that if he put the sign there, he was silently complying, so that's silence in the sense of control. But if he never put the sign there, it was like him silently resisting. So you can kind of see like silently complying, silently resisting, like throughout the film. And one way you can see this silence, like silence in the form of control, is through the intermission. I think that's the most obvious one, is how it's in German first, and then in Czech. And
you can incidentally see it in that film when they are at the railway station. It's not terribly visible, but there's this place where this ticket office, and above it it says some kind of notice how to buy tickets, and first it is in German, then it's next to it in Czech, you see. And also it says there's somewhere way out in Czech and Ausgang in German above it, you see. So it is, she's very right, you're permanently living in humiliation.
So when I was reading that, like I thought that was really interesting. I was reading obviously the same story, and she was saying how that was the case everywhere. And street signs, tram signs, like you said in the film and stuff, and it was like this like visible hierarchy, like linguistic hierarchy, like was really like humiliating for the Czech public, because they could always say who's actually in control and who was there. And although they didn't get rid of the language completely, it is still like a form of silencing. They are like secondary. And then another example is obviously when they get stopped by the police and they had to show the ID. That was kind of one that resonated with me, like from school, like knowing that you had to have ID and stuff like that, and like have to have like papers and stuff to prove, like from learning about World War II in school. And then historian Chad Bryant talks about how the Nazi imposed even tighter controls during this time, and in the same way, just as the greengrocer just complied by putting the sign up, the protagonist, Carl Crispin, was like, okay, I'll get my papers, he just silently complies as well. So that's kind of a way you kind of see the silent compliance as a way of control. But a way of So then there's all the opposite sides, where silence is a form of restraint, and that's kind of through the form of the film. So to look at metafiction, so metafiction is like it's a postmodernism technique. I did postmodern in English a bit, so when I seen it in the notes for the film about that it was kind of like a pre or a proto postmodernist film, they kind of point out like bits about that. It was quite interesting. So essentially metafiction is when the story is aware it's a story. It's like when it's self-consciously aware, it systematically draws attention to its status as an artifact. So that, of course, is Carl Crispin being the author and his character coming to life. So his character has come to life and he's lost control of what it's actually doing. And it's like, it blurs the binary, or the binary between imagination and reality. That's what postmodernism always does, like always deconstructs this binary. So that was really interesting, because it's kind of like a metaphor for the artists during Nazi occupation. They weren't in control of their own work, just as the author wasn't in control of his own character. And that becomes really clear at the end of the story, when we obviously find out it was the police that was in control the whole time. the word we're not against adventure books. You can easily see it's this whole state control is much wider than like what it's seen before. It's not just the everyday things you see, they're actually now placed in imagination as well. It's like this idea where censorship is now also becoming creator, like echoes back to Foucault's idea that like silence also creates imagination, creates the ideas and the thoughts. So I found that really interesting as well. And then the idea of the form itself, like metafiction, is this silent form of restraint because it's making fun of it, it's pointing it out, but it's doing it in a subtle way, so you can't really see, so you can when you know, but it's hidden, so it's a silent way of doing it. And that brings into laughter as well. It's another way. Obviously, the genre is comedy, and Martin Frick uses comedy throughout to kind of show this as well. Like, for example, the really extreme characters, the like really absurd stuff that's going on. Like, it's essentially mocking the way and the way the Nazi regime works. This level of control, and people, the audience watching at the time, would be aware of this irony because they're watching it. So it's kind of like creating this code between the director and between the audience. We know what's going on, but we can't actually talk about it, and they're using comedy and humour as a silent restraint to talk about it. And Fabio Goligo, I think, is the review. He says the film allows us to laugh, but at the same time reminds us the price of that laughter. So like laughter and stuff is not just this escapism; it's a form of survival essentially. And then another way they do that is through the set. So I read a brief bit about that. So the set is obviously filmed in a studio, but it's obviously made to look artificial as well. I don't know if you read that in the notes as well, but like the narrow streets, the lighting, the painted backdrops and stuff, it looks really artificial, looks really constrained. And that again can also be a metaphor for the fact that thoughts is controlled and policed, and like artists are under this control and they're under this control all the time. And that also happens in German expressionist cinema of 1920s. So they use this like the weird sets and the lighting and stuff to show the inner psychological states of the people at the time. So I guess that's what Martin Frick's kind of doing. He can't actually show what Nazi occupation looked like, but he can show how it feels through sets and through stuff like that. Like it's very constrained, it's smothering, it's like constructed, artificial. And then finally, the jazz music in the film, which I actually thought was the most interesting because I thought it was the most blatant form of resistance that you could see. Because obviously, jazz music was deemed degenerate in Nazi Germany, and it was banned in quite lots of cases because of its Jewish and black origins. So the fact that this is like the full soundtrack of the film, I thought really stood out. And it's still a way that does it without actually mentioning anything, but it's like the heartbeat of the film. It's like the plot of the background, it's showing the restraint blatantly, in my opinion. I feel like it really echoed the point, like when it says when they are silenced, they scream the loudest. It's like this music that's screaming in the background, even though the plot's not really saying anything much about it. So yes. Yeah, so the play doesn't really actually show, the film doesn't really actually show that much. There's no signs of swastikas or like Nazis or how Jewish people are treated and stuff, but like when you strip it back and take a postmodernist view or look at all these different techniques that could be used, there's actually quite a lot I thought you could get from the film about Nazi occupation. So yeah.
Thank you. Very good. Very theoretical, totally different from the other ones at 1 o'clock. This is brilliant. And so I hope people have a look at it, because it looks as though you're all doing the same topic, but you're not, because you're doing it all totally differently. That thing about the fact that it's really dominated by jazz music in 1941, I find it really quite incredible how they got away with it, but nevertheless, there you are. Okay, thank you. Well, that was, we've done it very quickly. What I want to do, I'll probably let you off early, but let me go to where we were. It will ask me again to do all the bloody identification, which is bad because I would have to switch off the... Okay, I'll do it without it then. I wanted to talk to you about the film The Cremator, which we're going to see tomorrow, and there is actually material about it on Moodle again from my friend Fabiano Golgo. Cremator was a film made by film director, his name is Juraj Herz, Actually, quite interestingly, it was a film which was made in 1968, so fairly late. Although if you, I mean, I keep talking about the thing when people experience a war, it is such a harrowing experience that it's very difficult to get rid of it. And sort of in the 60s were still a fairly early time. People still kind of felt traumatized by the Second World War. So it's not terribly surprising that this film was made. It's a fictionalization of a novel called The Cremator by Jewish writer Ladislav Fuchs. It is very topical. It is a brilliant film, although it's a bit of a horror, frankly, so no more escapist entertainment here. It is the story of a Mr. Kopferkingle, an employee of a crematorium, who is slightly mad to begin with, but it's interesting because he kind of emphasizes that he's incredibly decent and nice and from a middle-class family, and I have to take care of you and make sure that you are affluent and all that, and I'm doing that and I'm wanting to be a good citizen, and that's what he does or says when Czechoslovakia is still a normal democratic country, but then the country experiences slowly what we are experiencing everywhere these days, like Keir Starmer is now banning demonstrations if they are repeated, which is totally crazy. Also, I think they've already banned this wonderful Labour Party demonstrations which annoy people. So you mustn't be noisy when you are demonstrating, because that would make you banned anyway. So God knows where it all goes. Also, I've mentioned here how they have arrested 1,500 people for holding a piece of paper. But anyway, so and in various other countries of the world, there is this slide away from democracy as well. So this is why it is topical, because here you have this allegedly very nice middle-class person, Mr. Kopferkingle, who, as democracy slides towards Nazism from kind of 1937, 1938, 1939, 1940, he slides more into madness and more into supporting this authoritarian regime. And of course, the film argues that authoritarian regimes do kind of tend to rely on maniacs. So they kind of zoom in on people who are potentially willing to cooperate. And it's true that Mr. Kopferkingle, from the very beginning, when it's still a democratic Czechoslovakia, is obsessed with weirdnesses. Like, I mean, what is it? Twins that are conjoined or whatever, or various kind of, I don't know, venereal diseases. You see all that in that film. But then, of course, and he's obsessed with death because he's he works in this crematorium and he's kind of witnessing daily kind of disposal with dead people. But while the newly anti-democratic regime kind of encourages him, there's a gentleman, and this is another thing we were previously mentioning about, talking about Karel Čapek, who didn't need to go to fight in the First World War when he was 24 because he was ill, but nevertheless he was totally traumatized by the horrors of the First World War anyway. And the First World War still, in the post-First World War period, made an incredible impact on people. There is this gentleman called Mr. Reinke, who was his fellow soldier in his unit in Austria-Hungary during the First World War, and Mr. Reinke is now a Nazi. I mean, the dialogue in the film is in Czech, but I think they would probably be talking to Mr. Reinke in English, in German, because obviously he's a German Nazi, is trying to persuade Mr. Kopferkingle that he's certainly a bit of German blood in his body. And then it becomes, he realized there will be a career in it. And he really does kind of, it looks, end up in a fairly sort of strong career. And the film was made in '68 during the liberalization period, during the Prague Spring. which was then put to end by the Soviet invasion. But of course, although the primary inspiration is this kind of collapse of a democratic state into Nazism, which was imposed from the outside, it isn't exclusively about Nazi dictatorship, because throughout the film there are always references to the party, or will you join the party. It never says the Nazi party. And in fact, apparently, there was an ending which didn't survive, where Kopfer-Kinkel actually at the end of the film, years later, welcomes the Soviet invasion in '68. But maybe that was a slightly hysterical reaction to the invasion by the director Uri Herz. And anyway, I suppose the people in the studios were so afraid that they kind of destroyed it, so it doesn't go into the present of the time when the film was made. So anyway, that's my little introduction to the film tomorrow. Maybe we will slowly sort of call it a day. Do you have any comments? Very good. I really appreciated those theoretical bits, and I really appreciated that you found them. And do you have any questions to her? I should have asked that before I was talking about this film. You happy? Well, to be continued tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll call it a day now. Thank you. And the video will be on